Welcome back to Graceful Alliance, the podcast where faith and mental health come together to bring healing, understanding, and transformation. I'm your host, Dakisha Stevenson, a licensed professional clinical counselor, and I'm so honored to have you here again. Today, we're talking about a topic that often is misunderstood, overlooked, or dismissed in the church: depression in the body of Christ. This is a real issue affecting real people who love God, who serve faithfully, who worship on Sundays, and yet when the music stops and the service is over, they find themselves in a deep emotional and spiritual battle. If you've ever felt like no one understands your sadness, if you've ever been told to just be happy, or if you've ever felt guilty for struggling, this episode's for you. Today, we're going to cover what depression looks like in the church and why it's often hidden, how depression impacts believers on a spiritual and emotional level, and how we can truly help, not hurt, those who are struggling. So, take a deep breath, find a quiet space, and let's talk about it. Let's start with depression is real. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not just feeling sad. It's a serious mental health condition that affects millions, including believers. But here's the thing. Depression in the church often hides behind smiles. It's the worship leader who sings about joy but cries at night. It's the pastor who delivers a powerful sermon but feels completely empty inside. It's the church member who faithfully serves in ministry but is barely holding on. Why do so many hide their depression in the church? Because they've been taught to. They've been told, if you just trust God more, you'll be fine. They've been made to feel like struggling emotionally means they're failing spiritually. They've heard messages that say Christians should always have joy, but they never talk about what to do when they don't. And let's be clear, having depression does not mean you lack faith. Even some of the greatest people in the Bible struggled with deep sadness. David wrote about feeling crushed and abandoned, Psalms 42 and Psalms 143. Elijah, after performing miracles, was so overwhelmed he wanted to die, 1 Kings 19. Job lost everything and wished he had never been born, Job chapter 3. And Jesus, in his humanity, felt deeply troubled at Gethsemane, Matthew 26 and 38. So, if you're struggling with depression or know someone who is, I want to say this loud and clear. You are not alone. They are not alone. And they in you are not a failure. Depression doesn't just affect emotions. It affects the whole person. Physically, it can cause exhaustion, loss of appetite, chronic pain, and even immune system issues. Mentally, it can create brain fog, a loss of motivation, and deep feelings of worthlessness. Spiritually, it can make people feel distant from God, struggle with prayer, or wonder why they don't feel His presence. This is where a lot of guilt and shame come in for Christians. People ask, why can't I just shake it off? Why does worship feel empty? And am I not praying hard enough? The truth is, depression affects the way we experience faith, but it does not change God's love for us. Think about it like this. If someone has the flu and we don't tell them to just have more faith to get better, no, we encourage them to rest, seek treatment, and allow time for healing. That's the same that's true for depression. Now that we understand how real depression is, the question is, how can we help? First, let's talk about what not to do. So, what not to say to someone who has depression? Just pray about it. That's all you need to do. Pray. Prayer, it is powerful, but depression is not a prayer issue, it's a health issue. Instead, say, I'm praying for you and I'm here to support you however I can. You have so much to be grateful for. Why are you so sad? Depression isn't about circumstances, it's a medical and an emotional condition. Instead, say, I know you're struggling and I want to listen. You just need to have more faith. This adds guilt to an already heavy burden. Instead, say, God is with you in this and you are not alone. Other people probably feel worse. This dismisses their pain. Instead, say, what you're feeling is valid and I want to support you. Now let's talk about what we can do. How can we help someone who is struggling with depression? Listen without judgment. Sometimes the best thing you can do is simply be present. Encourage therapy and support. Let people know that seeking professional help is not a lack of faith, it's a step toward healing. If you're a pastor or a leader, consider compiling a list of Christian counselors. Check in regularly. Depression often makes people isolate themselves. A simple, hey, I've been thinking about you. How are you really doing? Can make a world of a difference. Remind them of God's love, not just the verses. Sometimes people struggle with depression, know the scriptures, but don't feel them. Instead of just quoting a verse, remind them, you are deeply loved by God. God sees your pain. He is not disappointed in you. You don't have to be okay to be loved. And offer practical help. Depression can make even basic tasks overwhelming. Offer to bring a meal, run errands, or just sit with them in silence. The goal is not to fix them. The goal is just to be present. If today's episode touched your heart, I want you to know there is hope. There is hope for you. There is hope for your congregants. There is hope for your loved ones. Depression does not define you or anyone else. God's love for you and those you love has never changed. If you're a church leader, I want to encourage you. Let's create churches where people feel safe to be real, to struggle, and to heal. I'll say that again. Let's create churches where people feel safe to be real, to struggle, and to heal. If you or someone you love is struggling, don't be afraid to reach out for help. God works through prayer and people, through faith and therapy, through the church and the resources He's given us. So thank you again for listening to Graceful Alliance, and I hope to see you next time.